Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the True Life Podcast. In a world high on hype and starving for truth, Matt Ritchey calls bullshit and builds integrity. He's the architect of Inner Circle, a network of builders and leaders, proving business can be sacred. And true leaders are always innovating, always evolving. No gurus, no smoke, no mirrors, just leaders forged in fire, walking the razor's edge between legality and liberation in the world of plant medicine. Matt Ritchie, thanks for being here today, man. How's it going?
Thank you for having me, George. I don't even know how many times I've been on now. It's at least 3 or 4. So it's good to be back. Good to be here with your network. And just want to say, everyone out here listening, I did not write what he just wrote there. He wrote all of that. That's the genius of George, just being aware of who people are and seeing their gifts and their beauty. So I just want to say thank you for that introduction, George. It's a great encapsulation of what we're working on here.
Well, thanks, man. Like I've known you for a while now, and I always see you, Matt. Like I remember reaching out one of the first times and being like, "You are an awesome community builder. Like you're everywhere, man. Like you're just in New York, you're in Denver. Every time sometimes you give me these awesome phone calls like, "Hey, George, my buddy's got a boat in the harbor. I'd love to see you down here." I look at the invite, and the boat is bigger than my house, and I'm like, "Dude, look at Matt Ritchie. Matt Ritchie's everywhere, man." So it's true. You have a beautiful community, and the people in your community are all leaders, and they're all builders, and they're all doing something really incredible, man. So it's truth.
I appreciate that. Yeah. And sorry you didn't make it down for the boat. That was our now annual LA boat extravaganza. We're just, bringing people together. I say it's always the right people in the right setting, in the right conversations. And the middle of the summer is a good time to take in what is around us, right? I mean, we live in LA, or I live in San Diego, but we live in Southern California with these amazing, weather and water. And like say, people have access to these boats. And I get people all the time who are saying, "Hey, let's do this. Let's host it here." I'm like, all right, let's, we can have a little fun and we can have a little enjoyment in the business, conversations we have. So I think having the right setting, right? We talk about set and setting, right? The right setting makes all the difference. And I don't really do business hotel meetings or these stuffy rooms. I'm either at someone's home, or we're on a boat, or we're at a beautiful location or something to that effect, or in nature, because for me it's all about connection to the people and the human element, and stripping away all the the external factors, getting down to the human element. Usually in beautiful settings, that tends to happen more easily because people feel more alive, they feel more connected, they just feel more open, and that's the beauty of a great setting.
Yeah, I think it's conducive to building relationships too when there's that trust there and there's not that edgy feeling of like this guy's speaking today, I got to listen to him, or we're over in this conference, we're in room 307 today or something like that. But that's the beauty of membership, right? Like that's what Inner Circle is. Like that's what you're buying, is sort of the speed of trust.
Yeah, that's part of it. And I think a lot of people too. I mean, I've sat in a ton of these rooms in the last 15 years. Is that everyone's trying to sell everyone something, right? And like you're sit at this room, even if you have great, facts and education, wisdom to drop on people. At the end, it's kind of like, hey, buy my course, or hey, like join my club, or hey, like let's whatever. There's nothing wrong with that per se, but people are just tired of being set up to be sold to. And we don't do that in our circle. It's like everyone's coming to the table as an equal, and we share great education, great information. And if there's opportunities to work together, that's part of the conversation. But it's never, we're never having, like, say, I just hate the whole guru model of like, stage, sell from, educate from stage, and then you're essentially selling people. And it's like it's this one-way street, right? So we always set up these container shows back and forth, this dynamic. It's, I'm not leading, I'm not better than anyone. I'm just sort of leading the container and helping everyone to connect further. And that's what people really want. They want to be seen as equals. They want to be seen as who they are. And then, of course, if there's a chance to work with people or do business together, then that's the opportunity.
Do you see that as a model, Matt? Like I know that we were at a few events together, and specifically that 216 Jacob Tell's event, District 216. And I think that what Inner Circle doing models this as well. But it seems like the evolution of sort of getting together and building something. Like we're moving away from this idea of sit in lectures into like hands-on, being part of something, bringing something to the table, and like everybody's part of the experience. It seems so much more experiential, these places that I'm going to. Do you see that as a future? Is that something you're building into these models?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I've been doing that for over a decade. So we've been doing experiential events and learning since 2013, 2014 for sure. I had another business called Evo Experience, Evolution Experience, right? We would host these containers where people come in and have an experiential experience, right? Whether it be teaching people how to cook better, teaching people how to physically move their body better, teaching people how to connect more, whatever it is. It's more about embodying it and practicing it as opposed to just hearing somebody conceptually talk about it. Because I don't know about you, but for me, I don't really learn that well listening to people. I actually don't learn at all listening to people. If I hear you say something, I might remember it. If I see you do something, I might further remember that. But if I do it myself, if I experience it, if I get a taste of it, that's when it actually takes hold, or that's a potential seed planted for something to change. So we're doing experiential stuff all the time. Like I say, that's been my MO, because I just can't sit. And when I started getting into like kind of the leadership, personal growth space in 2010, 2011, that's all you did. You bought a ticket and you went to a hotel, and someone spoke from stage for 3 hours, and at the end they had an offer, and people go to the back of the room and sign up. If you don't do it now, you're a loser. Get up here and let's do it. It's like this whole thing, right? And we're over that. We're past the guru, the whole look at me. It's more of a we. And there was a guy who spoke on stage in 2011. I can't remember. Simon Manwaring. He wrote a book From Me to We. And I remember I read that in 2011. I was like, this is it. I was like, we're going from the me guru to the we collective intelligence, right? The whole AGI, right? It's we are the collective intelligence.
Yeah, I like that. It's so interesting to see like where we are right now. And something I'm super curious to pick your brain on is this recent Brian Johnson experiment. Like I've been looking through like the Twitterverse and all of these places. First off, I'm super jealous of that. That guy is crushing, and he's doing these citizen science experiments that I think are bringing so much knowledge and so much coverage to the world. Like it's fascinating to see, man. What are your thoughts on that whole experiment? What was going down there?
Well, if anyone doesn't know who Brian Johnson is, we're talking about there's like 10 Brian Johnsons in the world as well, even famous ones. So it's like the Brian Johnson who's the Don't Die, right? It's like his whole brand is Don't Die. And if anyone's been following Brian Johnson, which I have been for like 3 or 4 years, whenever he really started his journey, it's so cool to see. I did just read his download, did some of his, read some of his stuff and shared it on some of the platforms. I was super excited because here's the thing, like here's this guy who's essentially a human guinea pig. He's basically taking his own life, not taking his life, he's using his life to see what works and what doesn't, of course for him, but for the greater good. So I love that. I love that someone's out there embodying and doing and essentially being the the tip of the spear, right? So for me, that I just want to say, full respect to anyone who's doing that and taking on the challenge of becoming, not saying your best self. And I don't want to get into his motives, and he say he's exchanging blood and plasma for this kid. That's a whole nother conversation we can maybe go into in the future. I don't have I'm very neutral on that, but point being, getting back to the psychedelic portion of it, it's just reading his thing, like say his whole thing is around don't die, right? And I think that, after his first experience, I'd be curious to hear, his voice and how things may have changed, but just seeing his writing, I could already see he shifted. I could already see that he talked about how he experienced death or experienced the concept of death in a greater experience in that elevated state. I think that's what a lot of people get out of a psychedelic experience, is they get this elevated perspective of course we're all going to die eventually. It's just the inevitable human cycle of this physical 3D reality, right? And I think he's maybe coming to some realization of like, hey, maybe the goal isn't to die. Maybe the goal is to live to peak live, right? And whatever that means for you. And that's one of the things, say the riffs that I had around following Brian Johnson for the last couple of years. I remember him specifically talking about him going to a concert and, basically being up past his bedtime for 9 p.m. and getting all these lights and all this noise and how he didn't sleep as well, and how he's basically saying, I know you guys are going to, whatever. My goal is to not die. It's not to experience life to the fullest. It's to not die. I'm like, well, that just didn't resonate with me. Like, no, I don't think most people don't want to not die. They want to experience life to the fullest. So that's what I hope for Brian Johnson, is that he can really get that spark of, and it felt like from his first post, he was almost already there. And he's going to do a few other more journeys in the next month or two. So I'm curious to see, after a couple high dose psilocybin journeys, where he comes with his whole business model of don't die and what that changes in his perspective on how he approaches that. Because that to me feels like the biggest shift for him, is he's got this whole thing is like, hey, like he had messed up his health to a certain degree. He's kind of brought it back 180. His whole focus is not dying. Okay, well, maybe the focus is, like, say, is to live a peak life and to really have an experience like no one else that has lived before you. That feels worthwhile. And I'm not saying what he should do with his life, but it feels like he's getting more meaning in his life already.
Yeah, I was following it too, and for me, on one hand, like it's so hard for me to, as a billionaire, and I can only see it through my lens of life, which is not a billionaire. And I look at it and I'm like, that's so
You're not a billionaire yet?
amazing. Not yet, man. Not yet. Maybe one day.
Second
Some of my
millionaire,
I'm getting close. You know, I'm doing all right. I'm doing all right. If you woke up and had what I had, you'd jump out a window. But I'm doing all right. But when I look at Brian Johnson, it's like I can't, and maybe this is me being a hater, but like I can't help but think it's like Peter Pan a little bit. Like here's this guy that's talking about, I want to live forever. I want longevity. We can cure aging. And it's like, no, you can't. You cannot cure that. Like you can't have life without death. And then I just recently read, he came out with his a really eloquent piece about his trip and what he learned from it and his thoughts on it. And like it was awesome. Like it was really well written. But it just seems to me in his journey to live forever, what he's really explaining is the process of dying. He's talking about like, what if we could live without aging? You know, what if we could, my senses were reinvigorated like I was back as a teenager. And like all these things he's describing to me aren't longevity, but the process of dying. And I'm like, dude, this is kind of fascinating to think about it from that aspect. Like he's talking about these incredible ideas. And I see it all over Twitter. I see like Peter Diamante and a lot of the people in the space with AI are talking about the idea of fighting aging, but it seems, while beautiful, it kind of seems pedantic to me. Is that too far? What do you think?
I get it. I see both sides of it, and I feel as a man, you know, I'm over 40 now, and I understand the concept of like wanting to stretch your years, especially when you have unlimited resources, right? Like think about someone like Brian Johnson. I don't know if he's a billionaire, but he's a centimillionaire for sure. He's got hundreds of millions of dollars. Money's a non-object, right? So when you have that type of power and resources, then it's like, okay, well, of course I can do all these things, but I really want to live forever and or like, you know, basically like live longer and be and what we know as we get older, at least this is my wisdom is that the younger me didn't really know a whole lot, and I'm just now getting started in a lot of senses, right? So like 40 on, point being, if you could live to 120 in an effective manner that's getting shit done, how great could that 80-year run be from 40 to 120 or something to that? So I see the even impact in a good way that you could, for the right people. And I say it's like, I think I look at the Senate and our government, we have all these old people, right? And a part of me is kind of like, we need to have old people out of the system. And what I realized is that we need, it would be great to have really wise, embodied people in the system, as opposed to people who are in the system and it basically corrupted around them, right? They're part of the system now. So all they expect to is around age, right? Like, what does it mean to not say not age, but to age more gracefully or to age, you know, more or in a longer period of time? That's what I think he's really going to be getting to in a sense of like, hey, like I've got to this point where I'm a peak human. You know, I'm of course still evolving and still learning and still growing, but it's like, hey, I have all this wisdom from business and from life and now from the psychedelic realm and this, you know, spiritual, you know, whatever I'm learning. How can I put that into a you know, some sort of actionable plan that is, you know, benefiting humanity? And I think that is where I get excited in the sense that I don't believe any of these guys are really ever going to live forever. Like, I don't think that's possible. I mean, I don't think that's the geographic or the, you know, the biological, you know, we're not in that cycle, right? So I think there's a thing where he can set the bar and or set the example of what we can do or we can start to iterate on for the next, you know, generations so that we can live longer, healthier, right? I've already, and I think maybe we've talked about this or maybe not, but I'm 41 now. 4 years ago, I got the download and the inclination that I was a third of the way through my peak life. So 37 times 3 is 111. So I'm planning to be peak and doing stuff until I'm 111. So the point being that it's not that crazy to think, hey, like maybe I could live to, I think Dave Asprey's talking about he could easily live to 150. I don't know, maybe. And it's not about the time as much as it is the journey on the way to get there, right? And you know, if you're doing things that are impacting people's lives in a positive way, if you're doing things that you're feeling fulfilled in the work you're doing, and you're, you know, creating a family or creating a community of people that are doing great work as well, like we want those people to live forever, right? We want those people to live longer because they're, you know, net positive for the world. So I think that's the thing that gets exciting me. But of course, the other side of that, there'll be people who use it for evil and or use it for to continue their reign for a longer period of time. And that's the dichotomy of, you know, say good and bad, good and evil. But it's kind of like, well, all these things are just tools, right? And how we use them is really what matters. And I think that's the that's the point I take away from Brian is like, hey, how can he be an example of how we use this for good? And I
Yeah.
believe in general we're more good than bad. I think there's way more good people than bad people. So I'm on the future looks bright side of things, that I think this is going to be a net positive for the for the world. And like I say, I think he's going to get over his ego and his whatever around not wanting to die, and I think that'll be a net positive for him as well.
Yeah, that's well said. It's such an interesting turn in the world of psychedelics where we are right now. And I love to see the citizen science aspect of it. It's sort of like the evolution of James Fadiman's protocol, where he invites people to try these things. And I think Brian Johnson is doing the same by putting that out there. Like, here's what I've learned, here's how I've done it. And he's not telling people to do it, but he's definitely laying a foundation for people to see it as a pathway to move forward, which I guess it kind of brings me up to this next question of, what an interesting time in psychedelics right now. We've got Beckley buying a tie. You got Brian Johnson. We kind of see shift. We see schools starting to pick up regimens and stuff. Where do you see the world of psychedelics? Are we expanding? Are we contracting? Where does the inner circle, or where do you see it from your lens?
It's definitely expanding. I think it's been 15 months now, or 14 months since we had the MDMA rolling, and since then we've had a bit of a wind out of our sails, if that makes sense. Just from everything's momentum and or energy, right? So it's like had a bunch of energy leading up to last year, and then just like kind of fell off a cliff because it's kind of like, oh, it didn't happen, and now that's gonna all the potential possibilities from that just died, right?
Yep.
Not died permanently, but died in the temporary. So it's like we've basically been like picking ourselves back up from a regulatory standpoint. I'm connected to a bunch of people who are doing amazing events that are like, say, Brian Hubbard, right? If you're familiar with Brian Hubbard, with the stuff Ibogaine, he got the $50 million grant in Texas. They're taking that whole blueprint now. In a couple of weeks, they're hosting something in Philadelphia called Philadelic, which is similar. They're basically bringing Brian and a bunch of all these senators and congressmen, and the New Jersey governor and Pennsylvania governor and a few other people are getting there. Point being, we're just at the precipice of everything. So it's like the consumer sentiment or the business sentiment really did take a hit last year because there was all this excitement and kind of build up, and then the falling flat. But then this year, of course, Denver / Colorado really opened up the gates for people to take and get licensed and start to practice on a more legal level, which is kind of bringing things, more excitement back into it. That's a new model, or kind of like figuring out how that's going to work, and or how can we extrapolate that into new markets. We're still, just 10 months into that experiment, so we're still just figuring that out. All the point is that we're still nascent, it's still very early. And as much as we, we're riding these roller coaster waves because we're a part of it day to day, from the outside looking in, it's going to be this like, slow, rise to where we're going to eventually be. I hope that eventually is that we have, access to these compounds in a greater and effective way that's not controlled by big pharma and not necessarily the medical route of things. Now, I think that's possible, and it's definitely one of the possibilities, and or I think that's probable. That's definitely part of the possibilities that we will end up with, but I don't want that to be the only possibility. That's why I love what Colorado is doing, and essentially giving people options and or decriminalizing it so you can have your own experiments and or take on your own bodily autonomy. The libertarian in me loves that, in the sense that, hey, like, people need to have choices, and we're adults here, and we have choices of our own consciousness, and we want to experiment with our consciousness. Like, that's not, I don't think the government has any say in how we do that or why we do that. So I think we're on the right path. I think it's just, it's like the stock market, everything's consumer sentiment, and right now the consumer sentiment's been set somewhat low. But like I say, we had a great June experience in Denver. There's definitely things still going on. We hosted the Psych Tank. We got people that have businesses that are actually getting funded, and there is some things that are, looking bright, but it's still, still so early, and it's still so illegal. We think about the money coming in. It's just barely trickling in right now, just because it's just can't. I mean, we can't really get real funding into these sectors until there's some movement on legality, because just money, that's not the way money works. Money's all about risk reward. And when the risk is so high and the reward is, I don't say so low, but essentially not anywhere close to it, the risk has to be, the reward has to be way higher than the risk, right? And right now it's just inverted. So there's no real money other than angel investors and, some things going on like that. But the real money, the big money, is still just waiting on the sidelines, still just kind of waiting to come into play. And, that's both good and challenging, because there's, good projects out there that want the funding, and there's good people out there that, are leaders that are operating, that have a good vision and have something they're already building. And it's just going to take time and patience. And here's the real thing. It's like, are the real players, are the real leaders going to be able to stay in the game, in business long enough to be here when we get the real legality, and we get the, the support and the structure that we need? I hope so. but I'm not. I'm cautiously optimistic that that's going to be the thing. Part of what Inner Circle does is just help support those people, help bring those people together, help create strategic partnerships, or help make connections where we need. Because, like I say, this mycelium web is fragile, and
Yeah.
there's not a lot of, like I said, there's not a lot of money in this ecosystem. It's all about other resources. Like, how do we help each other out? How do we help build,
Yep.
strategic partnerships? How do we create win-win scenarios amongst us? Because it is still, it's still a very, very cutthroat at this point, as far as, there's not a lot of resources to be, split up among the pie of people. So we're still early is the whole point of it. And as much as there was momentum a year ago and that's fallen off, we're still just starting to kind of build that momentum back up with everything within Colorado and with everything within I think the regulatory system that I see that is potential. I think the Texas thing was big as far as getting $50 million allocated for ibogaine. Like, that's a huge next step. And, like I say, you just got to follow the money. When the money starts flowing, then you're like, oh, okay, there's something there. Because once the money starts flowing, that's when things are going to start moving, because that's what moves things. Unfortunately, that's the lubricator for all these programs and all these potential projects is money. And whether it be federally allocated funds or state allocated funds, or having the risk reward ratio be balanced enough where then private equity or private money can actually come in, we need that liquidity in the space.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about. I think there's some parallels to cannabis, which brings me to, and you have an incredible background in cannabis, and some of the people that you work with have been at the forefront of cannabis for a really long time. Have you seen this new measure that's coming up where they're trying to, I think it's Rand Paul that's trying to put something in there to stop Delta 8, or did you read up on any of these, on this policy that was coming through?
I did read a little bit about that, but you're not referring to the Mitch McConnell hemp bill thing they're basically rewriting right now. Is that what you're referring to, or no?
Yeah. Can you explain that? Like, I don't know enough about it, but I thought that I'd throw it to you because I don't thoroughly understand the concept of what happens if we let Delta 8 go or go.
I didn't pay attention to the news today. I don't really pay attention to the news. But yesterday, of course, they were, it's in the conversations to reopen the government. Basically, at the 12th hour, Mitch McConnell, if anyone doesn't know who that is, he's the Kentucky senator who, he's one of the ones we were talking about. I don't know how he's barely still alive, and he's basically making decisions for us, which is fucking infuriating for me. But that's a whole other he slipped in these little rider basically saying that hemp can't hemp will contain 0% THC from now on. Is the long and short of it. They're basically saying, hey, hemp is 0% THC. Now, I don't know if it passed yet or whatever, but they're essentially going to pass that to reopen the government, with basically the rider that's saying, hey, within the next 365 days, this has to change. So we basically will have 365 days to fight that, combat it. And here's the thing: they're basically trying to pit hemp against cannabis, right? They're trying to say, oh, hemp is the the non-THC, non-whatever, and cannabis is the okay, maybe if we actually opened it up and regulated them all under that guise, maybe. But this is all hodgepodge and whatever. And I get it. There's a lot of pushback amongst the gas station THC that's out there that's unregulated, no CO, no certificate of analysis. You don't know what's in it. And there are people who have gotten sick or just had bad medicine, right? But the reason that exists is because we have federal legalization of the real stuff, of the actual cannabis from legal farms. So this is a kind of a shit show in a sense that there's basically going to be, I don't want to say a war, but there's going to be a war for the next 12 months to figure out how we can regulate this plant, because it's all the same plant. That's the thing people don't realize. It's just all the same plant. It's just like what genome, like what strain is it? Like what's, we're all humans, right? Like what's your DNA background? You just have a slightly bit different DNA background, but you're still a human. You're still, whatever. So there's this fight that's going to go down to see, hey, what are we calling cannabis? What are we calling hemp? What is THC, and how does it impact people? I think this is the conversation we need to have. I think there's going to be more movement in the next 12 months than was previously ever, right? Because this is the conversation that needs to happen. I think the current administration is at least open to, hearing and talking about it and doing something about it, because no one else has been wanting to do anything about it, obviously. So I'm actually cautiously optimistic that this will be good, because like I say, it's a short term. It's like, oh man, they're going to ban hemp. Okay, well, but you have a year. So we have members. I was talking to them yesterday. Like, we have a year. Worst case scenario, we wind down our business and we do something different. Okay, well, that's the worst case scenario, which you don't want to have to do that. But if you have to do that, you have to do that, in a sense that you can go with the current legislations and keep moving. But point being, I think there's going to be more conversations and now more movement to try and figure out how do we differentiate these things. How do we create a legal landscape that actually lets these products. Because here's the thing, like people don't realize that most CBD is hemp derived, right? Because most people are not deriving, almost all CBD is hemp derived, right? So, and people don't realize as well, or Mitch McConnell definitely doesn't realize, is that hemp, the naturally occurring thing, has small amounts of THC in it. It's the entourage effect. It's one of the cannabinoids that helps build all the other cannabinoids. It's one that synergizes with all the other ones. So I personally do not use or do not recommend, CBD. Like pure CBD is not really that effective. It's just, it's better than like Advil, but it's not going to give you the impact of a full spectrum CBD. So all that to say is that there's just education that needs to go on, and it's education slash, fitting into the current, we'll say, billing structure, or what's the word I'm looking for? Fundraising structure of their current people, because there's a lot of people in their fundraising that don't want these compounds to be free and or open and or accessible to everyone, because that would mean I don't know if you're following big alcohol, but big alcohol is down 20 to 30% over the last 3 years. So the last 3 years, people drinking 20 to 30% less alcohol. And of course, you see that going into beverages, THC beverages, and functional mushrooms, or of course psychedelics and cannabis. But all that to say is they see the things coming, and they're basically trying to hand it over to their constituents in a way that allows them the most profit and or control of these plants in the future. So we have a year here to fight. I'm very optimistic. We have some fighters in our space. We have some people educated and people who have voices, and we'll see how it goes. Like I say, I'm hoping that we can the Mitch McConnells of the world and them can be educated and or just maybe out the door. I'd say I don't know if you follow him, but he fell down a couple weeks ago, and he looks like he's barely alive, and like he's out there. I don't know what his role is, but he's one of the leaders of the Republican Party, and it's like, come on, guys, like what are we doing here? Like this is not representation of the people, right?
Yeah, not at all. So much of the people in positions of authority are almost octogenarians. I'm grateful that they got to serve the time they did, and a lot of them had some great ideas, but it's time to pass the baton. Like we can't have change unless we get fresh ideas and let old ideas die. Shout out to Alan Romano over here. Alan, first off, thanks for being here, man. I hope you're having a beautiful day. He says, yes, great things are happening in the field and have been for a while in terms of research and scientific data showing the effectiveness of these medicines. However, this is not new. We have had this data for almost a full century, going back to the 50s and 60s. There were thousands of articles written about the effectiveness of these medications, not to mention that the National Institute of Drug Addiction itself knew about ibogaine before the Controlled Substance Act came out. They were about to. I think it goes on there, but yeah, Alan, great points. Like this has been around for a long time. We have seen this before, Matthew. We saw this in the late 50s and into the 60s, man. Are we going to, is there some truth to the old idea that history doesn't repeat, but it rhymes?
I do like that, actually. I wasn't around in the 50s and 60s. I don't really know the sentiment of how things happen, but we live in a different age today with information, with education, with how we can transmute, conversations just like this. And I think that the propaganda of the 50s and 60s really held down any movement of that education and that data set that he's talking about, because you're right, the data's there. It's not like, and these have been safe and effective for thousands of years amongst tribes. Not really there's no real risks compared to like the normal pharma model that we have, right? Compared to the normal pharma model, this is like gold. And anyway, I digress on that, but I think for sure we're going to see, and I talk to these people all the time, I think we're going to for sure see movement on psychedelics, but it's one at a time. People think psychedelics is some broad thing. It's like every psychedelic compound, one at a time, will go through, but it needs to go individually, right? So MDMA, psilocybin, DMT, ibogaine. I think it's crazy they're starting with ibogaine, because that's one of the strongest, most, impactful. Not that that's bad, but my point being, I think psilocybin would be a better one to start with, especially because it's better for microdosing and or I don't know. That's a whole other thing. I don't care which order they go in, as long as they can each individually get their time in the sun and get their due court process, as far as education, as far as knowing what they do and or do not do as far as activations. And that's why I believe psychedelics will be way easier to make legal, because cannabis, they've been muddying the waters around, oh, does it actually do anything? The science says this, oh no, the science says that. You can't muddy the water around psychedelics. There's such a black and white transformation for people, especially with PTSD or people that have
Hmm.
traumatic brain injuries or whatever. You can't muddy those waters. You can muddy the waters saying, oh, God, his pain went from a 10 to a 7 with CBD. Oh, that's subjective, right? Whatever. You can't muddy the waters on the psychedelics. So they're basically going to be forced to reclassify and deschedule these compounds one at a time because of the actual impacts they're having in people's lives in a positive way. Now, I think that'll obviously open up for cannabis and other things, but I think these compounds will be legal first before THC will be on a federal level.
Wow, that's a bold statement to see these coming through. I've kind of flipped a little bit. Like part of me thinks that I went way down the rabbit hole of like psychedelics will never be legal because they dissolve boundaries and there's no way to centralize them. And without centralization, you can't set up supply chains. And without supply chains, you can't set up the real rules around it. So I went down that rabbit hole for a while. But then when I started seeing, like recently we saw Beckley buy Atai Life Sciences. Atai is a phenomenal company, by the way. I'm not a financial advisor, but I'm thinking that's a pretty awesome stock. Just throwing that out there for people. But but then I came to this, yeah. But then I came to this realization, like maybe we all win. Like, why not let the big players buy the small players, spend their fortunes in clinical trials, and then I just buy my bag of weed or my bag of iboga or my bag of mushrooms from Chewy down the street. Now I have clinical proof from the clinical trials. Like I already know it works. Like maybe do we both win in this situation?
So you're saying let them take on all the the money or the figuring out what works or what doesn't in the safety regulations, and then we're just going to buy it on the black market.
Like they're proving what we already know. Like it works.
Right.
Why do you need to prove it unless you want going for a patent or something?
Well, exactly. I don't need you to prove it.
I know.
I think what most people need, or what how the regulatory system works, is you have to prove it in order for us to put our stamp of approval on it, right?
Right.
Yeah. So I think that's that's the inevitable end, because most people. Here's the thing: we're not most people. Obviously, most people will never try something that's not regulated and or approved. Right. I mean, honestly, pre-COVID, getting into the cannabis space, I was way more like, oh, the FDA is regulating our things to make sure that we're safe and effective. Let's make sure that we're not eating bad things or consuming bad things. I don't believe that at all anymore. I literally don't believe that at all. That's not their goal. That's not their vision. Their vision is to basically steward in the drugs that are, that they think they make the most money on. I hate to say that, but it really is. And it's because, 40% of their funding comes from all the, the pharmaceutical companies.
Yeah.
Now, I think there's things in place that, I don't think they're just green lighting things that are killing us. That's not bad, but they're not green lighting the things that are the best and safe and most safe and effective for us. If that was the case, they would go out and study all these things and say, hey, no one's ever died from cannabis. No one's ever died from psilocybin. Maybe we should try these, right? That's not what they're doing. So my point being is that they're controlled, that they can only really look at and review the things that are being pushed to them, which are being pushed to them by the pharmaceutical company. So it's like a whole system that's basically corrupted that you just can't. It's really hard to break into that system, which we're, like I say, having someone at the top like Bobby Kennedy, I think helps.
Yeah.
That's why I'm cautiously optimistic that we could have some movement here in the next 4 years. But it's a process, like say, and honestly, being an American and looking at our Constitution and all the craziness that's happened in the last 5 years, I'm kind of not mad that our process takes a little longer than I would like it to, because I think about other things. I think about free speech or other things like that they could easily just change if they wanted to, but they can't. And what I've really grown to appreciate about the USA is that we have a constitution that Canada doesn't have, that New Zealand doesn't have, or Australia doesn't have. We think these countries are the same as us. Not even close, man. It's not even close. So my point in all of that is that we will, as the people, for the people, by the people, have more say in what we do than countries like that. And that to me is exciting in the sense that we can have a voice, and I think we can have an impact on what these things, how these things shake out in a way, how people get access to them, how people are educated around them. And that's really the background for Inner Circles. Like how do we connect and create leaders to create the best products, services, and education to steward these compounds into the mainstream in a safe and effective way? How can we bring these things to the people in the way that they need them, in a way that is safe, that it keeps people trust. It's all about trust, right? How do we build this trust? Because anyone who's taking a substance that may change their life, they want to be it's pretty delicate, right? So you're in a very trusting situation if you're going to do that. So the more trust we can build, but that's a human thing. Humans, you don't trust products, you trust humans, right? So
Yeah.
the human behind the products and behind the services, behind the whole system is what we need to build. And that's what Inner Circle is about. Like, how do we build the best humans to go out here and help build the system?
Yeah. Man, now you're speaking my language. Like in my idea of what would be greatest for us is a full disruptive force. And I think you see that happening. I think you see an incredible force of disruption happening, not only in business or through AI, but in government, in laws, in trust. And it's interesting that all these things go together, whether it's Mitch McConnell or the FDA or some of these ideas, like they're all beginning to fracture and die. And while it may seem like chaos to most people, I see the birth of something beautiful. I see birth pangs happening of people finding their own way, finding trust in themselves rather than trusting a system that may or may not have their best ideas in mind. Like that to me is exciting. And I'm hopeful that we see this explosion of creativity with psychedelics and music and artwork. I think that's on deck when I start looking at some of these younger Gen Z people coming up with just these radical voices. I'm like, I might not agree with everything they say, but these people are talking about fundamentally changing a system that works for them. And that to me, that's psychedelic, man. That's exciting.
It's disruptive.
Yes, it's
If
needed.
nothing, it's disruptive.
Yes.
It can go one or two ways. It can go great or it can go poorly. So disruption is not it's not the thing. The thing is how you move past the disruption, right? The psychedelic experience is not the thing. The integration and the embodiment is the thing, right? So that's why I agree. I love that in the sense that psychedelics is as within, so without, right? Or as without, so within.
Yeah.
I think when we have that disruption internally, then we have the option or the awareness and the ability to externally disrupt. And I think that's what psychedelics are by nature. They're a way to get us out of our normal states, disrupt whatever current reality we have, and hopefully give us some introspection on how we can be better and how we can make that disruption, move us in a way that is positive and that's impacting, of course, our lives, but of course the lives and the people around us. And I think that's the biggest thing psychedelics does is it kind of connects, it connects us to the greater good of people, making us feel connected in one, whatever that is. And then from there, knowing that how can I do things that are hurting other people because I'm connected to them, because I'm feeling on a cellular level, we're brothers, we're connection, right? So that to me is where, I had my psychedelic journey for 15 years now, but now just thinking back to the initial, when you have those initial disruptions, that was the disruptor of me. Like, oh my God, we're connected. I remember like seeing this fly, I was in the shower, I had, whatever dose I was in, I saw this fly, and it like got drowned, and I almost started crying. So I saw this fly drowning. I was like, but you just feel the connection to all living things. And when you have that connection, you can't unsee that. You can't unfeel that. And when you have that integrated into you, then you do better. You do things that are more, impactful for all, right? You're thinking about people, planet, profits, purpose. You're, quadruple bottom lining it. You're doing things that are different, right? You're thinking about, you're in an elevated perspective, right? Yeah. That's why I have a brand called Elevated Executive. Like, how do we get people to think in an elevated way? How do we get people, specifically executives, people who are leading companies, people who are leading organizations, who are leading movements, who are leading, communities and networks? How do we get them to think at that elevated level?
Yeah, I love that, man. I gotta jump to some questions over here. People are blowing me up. Sophia, Ara, thank you so much for hanging out. I see you guys over here. Let me jump to them over here. So this comes to us from Sophia from Los Angeles. Sophia, thank you for being here. She says, Matt, what's the first step for someone trying to build trust in a new industry where hype outweighs integrity?
Well, I'm still a firm believer of looking people in the eye, coming in person, connecting. So skipping the Zooms and getting in person, that's where the trust is really built. I host every other month. I do an in-person mastermind. I do every other month here. I do a psychedelic salon here in San Diego. How do we get people to come together, connect in person as humans for humans? And then from there, we talk business, we talk whatever, but it's more, hey, we're all humans. And, when we're in the same, because here's the thing, energy only transmits so much. You can kind of get a feel of my energy right now, but if you were in the room, it's just different, right? We're in physical, like say, if you're a nerd like me, there's a brand called Heart Math, and I've been using Heart Math for over a decade. And point being, the heart and the brain have these energy fields, and the heart is 10 times stronger than the brain field. So when you're in a room of smart people, you might feel kind of interesting, whatever. If you're in a room full of heart-centered, open, aligned people that have their heart in their your business and what they're doing, like that's just different. It just feels different. And people, point being, that's when you get trust. Like, oh, this person's for real. This person's doing some stuff. They're not just talking a good game. They're actually, I can feel their energy is grounded. I can feel their heart is centered, right? So that's how you build trust, is get in person with people. You can do that to a certain degree online. You can do it to a certain degree virtually, but that in-person stuff you cannot replace.
Yeah. How does that translate, man? Like, obviously, you're spending a lot of time around a lot of influential people that are building incredible things. But from your perspective, and maybe some of the perspectives of people that you represent, how do you translate that feeling into an actual movement? You know what I mean? How do you take idea and translate it into real-time, actionable things happening on the ground?
Great question. That's not an easy task, because you got to go from, everything starts as a concept, right? Everybody's a thought,
Right.
and then it goes to potentially words, and then potentially into action, right?
Right.
It's the human process. So
Yeah.
what we do is we bring people together. We're connecting, we're just, communicating as humans, and then we're sharing, business ideas, or we're sharing, like, say we do roundtable masterminds where people get a hot seat, and you say, hey, my name's George, and I got the True Life podcast, and this is my wins for the week. I'm so grateful to do whatever. And my biggest challenge is X, Y, and Z. I need a resource for this, or I need for that. Okay. So we start to mastermind, right? That's the idea of a mastermind. Like, we all have so many, resources within our network, our beingness. And when we truly sit down and offer that to other people, magic happens. And 1 + 1 = 5 in that sense. So we can have a group of 5 or 10 to 20 people masterminding together, and there's people pop in, right? Like, oh yeah, I have a great resource for you over here. Oh cool, you need to meet my friend Jimmy because he does this or whatever. Or hey, like, let's go do the True Life podcast with George. I think you'd be a great guest. Whatever, right? Whenever you're in conversation, things just synergize, and it's really hard to replicate that virtually. And we do it. We do virtual masterminds as well. And you can, of course, the people and the people you're already connected with, and you already know their heart, it's much easier. But talk about building trust and putting these ideas into action, that really takes some time to get to there, right? So it takes some time to be able to trust the people you're doing it with, and then it takes you being able to put it into action. Sometimes that's a moment, and sometimes that's a week to integrate it. Sometimes it's a year. I highly recommend not waiting a year, right? The faster we can go from thought to embodiment to action, that's what it's all about, right? Like, how can we go to these, how can we shorten the process to making, getting shit done, getting stuff happening, right? And that's what the mastermind's about, is getting people to be unlocking their genius, connecting with other, resources and synergies, and then being inspired and holding each other accountable to take action on the things we're taking action on. And then, we come back and you do it again a month later or a week later, and keep, hey, this worked, this didn't work. Hey, I needed this resource. I needed that resource. And it's just a continual, we call it iron sharpening iron. Like, we're all just, we're not sparring in a way that's, hurting each other, but it's kind of like you're sparring for a fight, right? You're all sharpening each other. You're making each other better. You're showing each other how to do it, or showing, my techniques on this and your techniques on that. And it's a beautiful game.
Yeah, it is. I'm beginning to see this new, and maybe it's an old idea. My grandpa used to say, if you want a new idea, read a really old book. But this idea that, can you do it without hierarchy? You know what I mean by that? Like, it seems to me the best ideas are like, if you and I are in a room, like, I know that you have this particular set of skills of building masterminds. I'm going to hand that part off to you. George, I know you're awesome at meat. I'm going to hand that part off to you. Like, it seems like an absence of hierarchy and more of an accumulation of trust and community. But it's very difficult to move without a hierarchy. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. I've been studying people and leaders for a long time. And just think about it. I mean, you're a man, obviously, and you've hung out with a group of men before. There's almost always a natural hierarchy that forms.
Of course.
And it's not like chosen, it's not regimented, it's just, it almost forms naturally, right? Yep. So there's always going to be that, in a sense. There's always going to be the leaders amongst leaders, and the 1A, 1B, in that sense of like, and I'll be fully transparent, I'm like a 1B. Like, I'm okay taking the back seat to a really great leader. And I think that's honestly a great sign of being a great leader, is like, hey, like, I'm not always the best person to lead, or I'm not always the most educated, or what doesn't have to be me, right? So I think that's where it really comes in, is like, we all know we're really great at something. And when we all come together, we know that you're better than me at a lot of things, or you're better than me at your thing, right? And I think that's where the genius really comes in, when we see each other as equals. Yeah. We sit at that, we call it the round table. Everyone's at the same spot. Everyone's, there's no hierarchy. There's no the head of the table. There's no, I'm the leader. And of course, I'm kind of leading the conversation, but it's not like I'm better than you and I'm going to tell you what to do. It's not like, oh, okay, I'm just kind of keeping the order, right? So in that sense, there almost always is a hierarchy of some sort, even just in that sense of like me leading the leaders, and or we talk about like those natural hierarchies that occur. And like I say, when I find for the best leaders and the best people who get the most synergy and the most growth is that they come in the beginner's mindset of like, hey, like I know I'm a great leader, I know I'm doing whatever, but I'm coming as a beginner. Like, what can I learn from you guys? Like, what are you doing better that I'm not? Or how can I do this with my team that I'm not doing, or whatever? Those are the great leaders, and that's the synergy, and that's the stuff where that's what we cultivate. It's like we have the right people, bring them in for the right conversations, hold the right containers, and say there's never going to be no egos, right? Especially with men, and especially with building businesses, there's always, especially even in psychedelics, right? There's egos still exist, and hierarchy still exists to a certain degree. So to fight to try and fight hierarchy, or to say, oh, we're all equal, whatever, it almost seems a little silly. So it's like, how do we play with the current, not the current, but how do we play with? I think that's a natural law of the universe, is like just hierarchies in general kind of form. If you look at nature, like there's a hierarchy, right? So I don't think it's a bad thing. Like I always thought like hierarchy, like flat corporation works better. Yeah, maybe in certain things and whatever. And I get the concept of lack of a hierarchy, but in general, I hate to say this, but most people are not ready to be at that table and be at that round table. You have to earn that, and that's not just even building a business or whatever. It's like, how do you be a leader of people, right? A leader of leaders. And it's a process. It's not like, say, people aren't just born with that. It's a process. It's like any other skill. Leadership and humans and communication and all these things are just continual skill sharpening. So that's part of how do we bring the people together, bring them to the table, and everyone gets a chance to be the leader, and everyone gets a chance to be the student. And that's the beauty of a mastermind, is that you're both a leader and a student. And that's those are the best leaders and business people that I've seen, are the people who have that mindset of knowing their belief and strong belief in what they do, and also realizing they're a beginner and they don't know everything, that other people are better than them at other things.
Yeah, it's well said. Ariv, coming from San Francisco. What's up, Ariv? Thanks for being here, man. I appreciate it. He says, how do you spot the difference between a true collaborator and someone just looking for leverage in your circle?
Good question. Well, like I said, I have these types of, even virtual connection calls with everyone before we talk about, being a part of our network. So for me, one of my superpowers is within 15 minutes or less to know if you're full of shit or not, or if, where you're at in your, that's a very harsh comment, so I apologize. Where you're at on that journey of giving and receiving, right? And there's a lot of people who are early entrepreneurs and just kind of looking, hey, what can I learn? What can I get? And that's okay. I get it. That's a season of life. And once you found some sort of stability, offer, and baseline, then it's kind of like, okay, how can I give back to other people so I can get more of what I want, right? And that's what the inner circle, and that's what a mastermind's all about. Giving yourself first and receiving 10x from the group, because you're giving your zone of genius, and then you're getting 10x the zone of genius back for you, right? So there's a lot of people who just aren't there. Especially in traditional business, I don't think there's really a whole lot of incentive to mastermind and to share ideas, or to kind of help you first before you help me, right? That's not the normal MO for business. But we're flipping that. I mean, I've been doing it for 15 years in different industries, but like it's not crazy to think of now. And I say, honestly, the best leaders and almost all the best business people I see, that's kind of the model they have, in the sense that they know that they're a great leader and they're awesome what they do, but they know that there's other people out there that are better and do something different. So long story short is it's about knowing them. And sometimes, I've been fooled a few times here and there, but not for very long. And you say people's true colors always come out. It may be in the first conversation, it may be in the 10th conversation, but you can't hide who you are, especially in these types of conversations and these types of work. That's the work we're doing, right? And if you're going to hide and whatever, then that's you're not even doing the work, right? So all that to say is that just for me, and like I say, this is a superpower everyone can learn. It's not like I'm special, but just I've had so many conversations with people. I've done enough stillness work and meditation work and psychedelic work where I'm able to like just be present with people and kind of feel their energy of like, what are they really wanting? What is their value set? They say one thing, but what is behind the words, right? What's the energy behind the words? I talk to my kids about this all the time, because you could say the same words in different energies and they have way different meanings, right? Yeah. So the energy behind the word, the intention behind the word is really what we're looking for when we have those initial conversations, and just to see where they're at, because vocabulary means it's so big where people are at, because you can tell, are they in a victim mindset? Are they blaming other people? Are they taking responsibility? Are they where are they at? Where is their language telling me that they're at? They can tell me one thing, but the language and their energy tells me the real story.
Man, that's brilliant. Language is Language is everything to me on so many levels. You can really get an understanding of someone's inner dialogue by their outer dialogue. And you're like, oh, I see I wonder why they said it like that, or why did they use that word? But I agree. It's brilliantly said. Mateo coming from Miami. What's up, Mateo? How's Miami out there, man? Thanks for being here. He says, Matt, when starting a community, how do you balance inclusivity with the need to vet members for integrity?
Well, yeah, we're kind of coming through the whole inclusivity DEI conversation, right? And yeah, it's a great conversation. It's a great question. It's not that hard of an answer, though. Like, say, it kind of goes back to what we just talked about. And of course, we want to include. Let me back up. I don't want to include everyone, because you have to be somewhat exclusive to have the type of community and networks that you want to be in. If you just take in everyone, we'll extrapolate. Think about our immigration policy. If we just take in everyone, right? It's probably not going to be the best. If we have 500 million people come here in the next 5 years, it's not going to be the best, right? If we vet and look at it's a meritocracy, right? We need to, and that doesn't mean this is straight meritocracy, because it could be about heart and vision, right? You haven't maybe accomplished the things yet, but I can feel your heart. I can see the vision you have. So, okay, we have the heart and vision, let's build. Or I can see what you've built, you're great, but you need to work on your impact and your heart. Okay, come in, let's work on that. Where are you at on your journey? What are you willing to step into? I forget the original question. What was how do you build community and be inclusive without being exclusive? Yeah, I mean, here's the thing: if you can't be both. You can't be fully inclusive and exclusive. It's just this polar sides of the thing. But that doesn't mean, that's not saying I'm looking for all women or all white guys. Or it's about who shows up, who's showing up. Like, I don't care. I don't care what you look like. I don't care what you show up. And that's why I think Inner Circle, we have way higher percentage of women than the industry does, right? I think we have 40 to 50% of our members are women, right? Which is way higher than the industry, because they show up. They want to do the work. They need the support. They need community. They're more creatures of community than men are. So you have to be somewhat exclusive to be, to have the type of community you want. Because if you just let anyone in, then it just pollutes or just waters down the community, right? So it depends what you want. There's layers to it too. You could have anyone come into the greater community, and then you could have more of an exclusive community that meets at a different level. There's levels to it, but you have to keep some sort of guardrails up, or else it just kind of becomes Facebook, right, or whatever. It just becomes everything together, and that's okay. But that's not how I build networks. The strongest networks are more exclusive and smaller. So we have 100 plus members in ours, but we don't have 1,000. We don't need 10,000 members. We have 100 good members. That's a lot of people.
Yeah, if everybody's awesome, no one's awesome.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, I want everyone to be awesome. So, I mean, if that were awesome, then if that were the case, that's great. But as we know, we're humans and we're all on a journey, and I didn't used to be this awesome. So, I'm not excluding me on that thing. We're all on our journeys and working. But yeah, I think there just needs to be what do you want to get out of the group, right? If your goal is just to have the biggest group of people who like a certain topic, just let everyone in and just have conversations or whatever you want to do. That's fine. But if you want to have, like, for me, the goal is to have high integrity operators who work together, and you can't just let anyone in for that. Like, you have to have both the skills and the integrity. And we've held plenty of people out that didn't have the integrity but had great businesses, and vice versa. We've had a lot of people who don't have great businesses but have high integrity, so we let them in and we help them build, right? Because that's the skill we're building both skills. We're building your integrity and or your leadership skills, but you're also building your business. I'd much rather work with somebody with with great leadership skills in a crappy business and help them build their business, as opposed to having some hotshot come in with a great business and not want to do the leadership work and pollute the conversations and pollute the overall energy of the network. And we've done a great job in keeping that out. I think we've only had one member that I've had to remove from the membership over the last 5.5 years. And I'm not afraid to remove more people, but we've just done such a good job vetting people and had such magnetism for the right people. It just really hasn't been an issue. So until we get 10,000 members, I guess we're not going to get 10,000 members. But the point being, it's a numbers game, and eventually you're going to get someone who makes it through, or it becomes a problem. And that's just the way communities work. But you just got to have a system for everyone's. It's a values aligned system. So if people are not values aligned, it'd be easy to see. Everyone else can see, like, what's Jimmy doing showing up on the call drunk or whatever. He's just like, he's just not in our values alignment, right? So I think it's kind of a self-selecting community when it comes down to it, in the sense that people, either selecting in the values they have in the way that they're building, or they select themselves out. And I'm just basically the steward of that at this point. And eventually I'm going to be, someone else is going to take over that, and I'll be doing other things. But in general, that's the hardest thing to translate, is like, how do we keep the community clean? How do we keep the network tight? And how do we keep it high integrity?
Yeah, it's well said. Matt Ritchey, I walked you right up to this 10:30 mark, man. You doing okay on time, or you got some other engagements you got going on?
I don't have anything at 10:30, but I probably need to wrap fairly soon.
Okay. Okay. I got one more question coming in from Noah then, and let's see what Noah. Let me move it down here. Noah says, how do you foster a circular economy? How do you foster circular economy practices in a competitive industry where people usually think about only themselves?
Good questions. These are good questions. Yes.
Yeah. Like shout out to Noah. Thank you for being here. Coming from Austin, Texas. Thank you, Noah.
Hey, what's up, Noah? Yeah. So we can repeat the exact question again.
Yeah. How do you foster circular economy practices in a competitive industry where people usually think only about themselves?
Well, if you've been following this conversation, you'll know that our members are not in that mindset, right? So the idea that they're, we call it pay it forward, right? If you come in with the idea that you're going to take, or what can I receive? What can I get? That's the mentality that most businesses have. Like, I'm going to come in here and how can I maximize my membership? I'm going to talk to that person over there, and I'm going to go to the membership or go to the things and ask all the right questions and get all the information, right? That's a certain type of level of leadership or business leader. So the idea of a circular economy is that everyone in there is paying it forward first. They all have a great service or a business or whatever they have, but they're paying it forward first. And what that creates then is that it creates that trust, right? They're not just, when you connect with somebody in the network, they're not going to be like, oh, this guy's just trying to sell me something, right? Or, whatever. Like, if you're a part of our network, you've connected on some level, whether it be at a mastermind or even just in the directory, or you send them a DM or whatever. And there's a trust level there that is started, and then they know that you're not trying to sell them, you're not trying to screw them over. There's accountability built into that. If they screw over another member, that's A, they're probably going to be out of the network, right? But B, like, and here's the thing: I think generally most people are doing the best they can with the information and whatever they have available to them. Most people that are low integrity are just bad operators. Too much money at the end of the money. Too little experience on how to operate and how to make decisions. Whatever. So I generally think most people are doing the best thing they can. They're not generally out there trying to like screw people over. It's just not the case. I think most people are doing the best they can. And that doesn't mean they're a great operator. Doesn't mean they know how to make good decisions. Doesn't mean that they know what it means to create a strategic partnership. So, for us, creating that circular economy is easy. Getting the right people, magnetizing the right opportunities, whether it be brands that need these ancillary businesses, whether it be media people who can help amplify the message, whether it be marketing people who can do paid ads, whether it be compliance people who can help keep them compliant, whether it be, whatever. We have people kind of doing, you need insurance, you need this. We have people who are doing everything. So it creates this trust amongst people. And then what we talked about earlier, once you have trust amongst the people, then of course, then let's do business together. It makes it easy because like once I trust you as a human, I know you're not going to screw me over, whatever that looks like. Then I know we can do good business together. And that makes it just simple to create this circular economy, knowing that I'm going to get the best deal. I'm going to have, no issues working with them. There's accountability essentially baked into the whole system. And here's the thing, when you hold expectations for people, they tend to meet them, right? Especially in containers like this. When you hold that expectation high, people will meet you there. And that's what I love about our circular economy, is that it just keeps everyone accountable. It raises the expectation level for everyone. And it really just keeps everyone, operating at that elevated space as far as how they deal with people, how they follow up with people, how they communicate with people, how they charge people money. Everything just kind of keeps that to that highest integrity level. And that for me, it's really hard to create a circular economy outside of that trust, because how can I do business in a with people that I don't trust, or how can I create that accountability or that container without the trust? So all of it bases around the human factor and being trusting. And from there, then you can create whatever systems you want, whether it be circular economy or mentor-mentee or the mastermind concept or whatever. All that builds from the trust.
Yeah, it's well said. Matt Ritchey, always an awesome conversation, man. But before we land the plane completely, man, where can people find you? What do you got coming up? What are you excited about?
Yeah, well, we're winding down the year here. I'd say it's already, first weeks of November here. I'll be doing my last mastermind in Bel Air here next week on the 18th. If you're in LA area, reach out to me if you'd like to come out and meet in person. Like I said, we have a few seats left, I think, for that. We limited that to 20 people. But yeah, we're just excited for next year. Like I said, we're launching another brand. Like I say, Inner Circle's been building, but Elevated Executive is my other brand that I've been building on the side for the last year or two, helping basically it helps executives and small teams and even small businesses, basically create harmony and or strategic partnerships and or placement for their executives. So I'm really excited about all the stuff in the psychedelic space and the cannabis space as well. And what we're realizing is that that's it's a slow drip, and that's it's nothing's changing overnight. Although we had a little bit of a change last night after they officially signed in the back to work for the government. But either way, it's just been such a slow evolution. And we've built, like I have a few other businesses, but I've built the Inner Circle for this community. And I feel great about the network we've built, like say the 100 plus members we have. And, as we continue to kind of just build that, like I say, we have our whole East Coast team. Kyle Rosner's now based out of New York, Jersey. We just did our first large event there after Hall Flowers. We're going to be doing more events on the East Coast and other cities next year. So keep your eyes peeled. But it's really going to be about, the right opportunities for the right leaders to come together, to network, to mastermind, to bring the right conversations to the right people at the right time. That's all what it's all about. So Inner Circle's 5 years in, almost 6 years in now. It'll be 6 years in March that we started Inner Circle, and it's been crazy to think this ride through the pandemic, through everything that's happening now, and I think there's plenty of more growth for this industry, but it's going to be a slow drip here for the next year or two, and then like I say, we'll see how the legality of all the compounds shakes out. And we're going to be here. Like I say, it's all about creating the systems and creating the communities to take advantage of these opportunities when they come, and or to obviously create the opportunities by pushing legislation, by pushing these conversations, and pushing the people at the top to move and take action, right, whether it be in legal or otherwise. And I think Inner Circle's going to be a prime place for people to connect and have those conversations and continue to be in action towards these visions and these goals. So I appreciate everything you do, George, bringing people on, having these conversations, going deeper around all these compounds and just all the transformations around them, and or the epiphanies and the conversations that we tend to have on this side of the aisle that I think most people outside the psychedelic space, not most people, but a lot of people outside the psychedelic space aren't really thinking about, and the human consciousness stuff. And I think it's all, like I say, it's all scary because it's all being disrupted right now. But I think that's a good thing. And I think that's this short-term uncomfortable disruption will be, setting the foundation hopefully for a longer-term, stable, growing industry and or, access to these compounds. And I'm just super grateful for that, because I feel like, between my health and my family's health, I owe so much to these compounds. I owe so much of my mental health and my, my current elevated space and where I live in is just, it wouldn't have been possible if it weren't for cannabis, if it weren't for psychedelics, if it weren't for all these different, healing modalities, even just, coaching and integration work. Like, this is all so key to being, your best human self and to do good things in this world. I think psychedelics aren't for everyone, and those who are called to it and those who want to have the experience, I think it's such a great tool. So thank you for continuing to put that shine on it, putting the shine on the people who are doing it. I think the humans are the most important thing, in the sense that they are the ones that build the trust, right? Because no one's really trusting a compound, no one's trusting a brand, but trusting the humans behind it. And I think that's the element that we're looking to do the most with, is how do we create great humans to create great products and trusted resources and trusted education. And that's the game, man. And it's a slow drip, and it feels like you're in quicksand sometimes, but having conversations like this and, knowing the reach you have and, the good conversations you're percolating all over with these conversations is exciting. So thank you, George.
Yeah, man, you're very welcome. And everybody that joined us today, Ethan, Amani, Noah, Zara, Mateo, Layla, Arav, and Sophia, go down to the show notes, check out Matt's links down there, reach out to him. He's got an incredible outfit that he's working on with some incredible people. Matt, hang on briefly afterwards, but to everybody else from the sound of my voice, hope you have a beautiful day. That's all we got. Aloha.